In the blistering heat of a forgotten desert, a man stumbles upon the body of an alien princess, buried beneath centuries of sand. With her heart stopped and her life fading away, he makes a desperate choice, injecting her with a life-saving serum that might just be his last mistake. She wakes, gasping for breath, but the horrors chasing her are far from over. Now, as deadly forces close in, they must outrun the ruthless syndicate, whose dangerous experiments threaten the very fabric of the galaxy. With secrets hidden deep in her blood and a connection growing between them, will they survive long enough to unravel the truth? Or will the universe be consumed by the dark power they're trying to escape? The final stand is coming and there's no going back. If you're new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The twin suns of Vaster blazed relentlessly in the sky, casting a harsh orange glow across the endless expanse of crimson sands. The heat was unbearable, even for a man used to extreme conditions. Ethan Barron, clad in his brown stealth suit, trudged slowly through the desert, every step an effort against the unforgiving terrain. His suit was designed to regulate temperature and provide camouflage. But here on this desolate planet, it was a losing battle. Beads of sweat dripped down his forehead and the air was thick with the scent of hot sand and metal. Still, Ethan pressed forward, determined to reach the ruins ahead. He had been on many missions, but this one was different. The ruins of the ancient Sci-Fi civilization, lost to time and buried beneath centuries of sand, were rumored to hold secrets that could change the course of history. Ethan had always been a man driven by curiosity, and today that curiosity was about to take him deeper into the unknown. He paused, wiping his brow with a gloved hand, and surveyed the horizon. The towering crystalline spires of the Sci-Fi's ruins barely peaked above the dunes, their once majestic structures now half buried and weathered by the passage of time. He squinted, adjusting his visor to filter the blinding sunlight. The wind howled, shifting the sands with every passing second as if the desert itself was trying to bury the past even deeper. Another goddamn dead end, Ethan muttered under his breath, frustration rising in his chest. He'd been searching for hours, following the ancient maps and coordinates that had led him here. But so far, all he had found were more dunes, more sand, and more silence. The ruins should have been within his reach by now. His scanner, a highly advanced piece of human engineering that had cost him a month's salary, beeped persistently, its holographic display flashing with data. He pulled up the readings, staring at the screen with narrowed eyes. The device had been giving him false positives for the last few hours, tricking him into thinking he had stumbled upon something significant, only for it to turn out to be another mirage. But this time, something was different. The signal pulsed, with a rhythm, a beat that seemed almost organic. Ethan's curiosity flared once again. Could it be? Well, what now? He muttered, shaking his head. Guess I might as well check it out. Deploying his portable excavation unit, Ethan took a deep breath, steeling himself for the next challenge. The device hummed to life, its sonic waves cutting through the sand with precision. He worked quickly, knowing that the heat and the harsh environment weren't the only threats out here. Time was running out. If he didn't find something soon, he would be trapped in this hellhole of a planet with nothing to show for it but a failed mission. 20 minutes passed, and Ethan's breath caught in his throat as the scanner registered a deeper signal. The sand shifted, revealing a chamber buried beneath the surface. With careful precision, he cleared the last of the sand and peered into the dark, damp space below. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. There, lying in a perfectly preserved chamber, was a figure unlike anything he had ever seen. A woman, or at least what appeared to be a woman, lay motionless on a stone slab. Her violet skin gleamed like polished amethyst in the harsh sunlight, and her long, wavy black hair cascaded around her shoulders in wild disarray. The bodysuit she wore was sleek and form-fitting, with thin straps and a deep neckline that suggested a civilization both practical and aesthetically driven. Ethan's heart raced. This wasn't just a relic, it wasn't just an ancient artifact. This was something alive, or at least it had been. His medical scanner confirmed his worst fear. No heartbeat. She was dead. Her body seemed perfect. frozen in time, preserved in the sand like a forgotten memory. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something about her presence wasn't quite finished. It was as if she had been waiting for something, waiting for someone to find her. He scanned her once more, searching for any sign of life, any trace of what might have happened to her. Nothing. The desert had claimed her, and the sands had buried her. But the question lingered in his mind. Why had she been left here? And how had she survived for so long in this inhospitable world? Ethan took a deep breath. He couldn't leave her like this. Not when he had come this far. Pulling out his emergency med kit, he retrieved a vial of alien adrenaline compound designed for humanoid species. It was a long shot, but it was the only chance he had. He had never used it before, but he had heard the stories. Could it work? Could it bring her back to life? Here goes nothing, he muttered to himself, positioning the needle directly over her heart. The injection device clicked into place and the serum entered her system. Ethan held his breath, watching as several agonizing seconds ticked by. Nothing happened. No movement. No breath. Just the endless silence of the desert. Then suddenly, the unthinkable happened. The woman's back arched violently and her eyes snapped open, revealing the deepest shade of green he had ever seen. She gasped, her lungs filling with air, and her body trembled as if waking from a long, deep sleep. "Easy there," Ethan whispered, his voice soft and soothing as he moved to support her. "You're safe now." The woman's eyes focused on him, confusion and fear crossing her features. Her voice, though melodic, was rough from disuse. You brought me back?" "Guilty as charged," Ethan replied with a crooked smile, trying to lighten the tension. "Though I'd love to hear how you ended up buried in an ancient ruin." She tried to sit up but swayed dangerously. Ethan quickly caught her, his hand steadying her fragile form. The weight of her body against his made his heart race, though he couldn't quite place why. "Careful," he warned. "Let's get you somewhere safe." "My ship's not far," she whispered her gratitude, though her eyes betrayed a hidden story. "I was running from a syndicate enforcer. I thought I found shelter from the storm. But, well, looks like it's your lucky day," Ethan said, lifting her easily into his arms. "I've got a thing for damsels in distress, especially the ones I have to literally bring back from the dead." Her soft laugh sent a surprising warmth through his chest. "My hero," she murmured. The journey was just beginning, and Ethan knew it would be anything but ordinary. The desert had given up its secrets, but it was far from finished with them, and neither was the strange woman in his arms. The journey back to Ethan's ship, the Horizon's Edge, was not an easy one. The twin suns of Vaster had begun to dip below the horizon, casting a soft golden light over the sand. The temperature, however, remained unforgiving. Ethan adjusted the weight of the woman in his arms, noting how she clung to him with a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. Her violet skin shimmered faintly in the fading light, and her long black hair, still unkempt, framed her delicate features. "What is your name?" Ethan asked, trying to break the silence. Her breathing had settled, though she was still visibly weak. "Solara," she replied, her voice still hoarse but growing stronger. "And yours?" Ethan Barron." He adjusted his grip, making sure she was comfortable. "You're from Valir, aren't you? The Cyphrix ruins, they were of your people." She nodded slowly, but her eyes darkened, clouded with something Ethan couldn't quite decipher. "Yes. Valir was my home once." She paused, as if the words weighed heavily on her. But it was destroyed, consumed by war. By them. Ethan gave her a curious glance, but he didn't press further. Instead, he focused on getting her to safety. The thought of her being a survivor of such a destructive conflict was enough to make his stomach churn. He had seen the ravages of war in his time, but nothing like the devastation she implied. As they neared the horizon's edge, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was bringing her into the calm before the storm. He had no idea who or what was hunting her, but he had a bad feeling about it. Something about the way she had spoken of them hinted at something far more dangerous than a simple bounty hunter or criminal organization. "We're almost there," Ethan said, trying to reassure her. "It's not much, but it's home." The ship sat quietly in the sand, its sleek metallic form barely visible against the backdrop of Vaster's rocky desert terrain. It was a far cry from the massive military ships Ethan had been used to during his missions, but it was his sanctuary, modest, but efficient. It was equipped with everything needed for exploration: weapons, medical supplies, and enough food and water to survive for weeks if necessary. Ethan carried Solara into the ship, bypassing the security system with ease. The hum of the ship's engines greeted him as he stepped inside, and the doors slid shut behind him with a soft hiss. The interior of the Horizon's Edge was simple, but comfortable, with worn leather seats and functional equipment scattered throughout. Solara glanced around, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and confusion. "Your technology. It's so different," she said, trailing her fingers over a worn control panel. "Rugged, reliable. Like you." Ethan couldn't help but smile, though he felt a strange warmth spread through him at her words. "Thanks, I've always preferred practical things over fancy tech." He led her to the med bay, setting her gently on one of the examination tables. As he worked to gather medical supplies, he couldn't help but notice how her violet skin seemed to pulse with an unnatural glow, especially in the low light. It wasn't like anything he had ever seen. Valyrians were known for their striking appearance, but there was something about Solara that felt different, more alien, more powerful. "Just sit tight," he said, placing a scanner over her chest. "I'll get you patched up." Solara seemed to relax as the medbay's diagnostic system scanned her, the soft hum of machinery filling the quiet room. She closed her eyes, but Ethan could still see the faint tremor in her hands. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "For saving me." Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he focused on the display in front of him, trying to make sense of the readings. There was something unusual about her biology. Her heart was functioning in an entirely different way than human hearts. The scan revealed 3 separate chambers working in perfect harmony, something that had never been seen in any humanoid species. "Your heart. It's incredible," Ethan muttered, his voice filled with awe. "It's not just a heart. It's like a system, an entire network." Solara opened her eyes slowly, locking onto him with a look of deep gratitude. "It's part of who we are. The Valyrians were engineered for survival, trained for endurance. We've learned to adapt, even to clinical death." She paused, her eyes clouding over again. "But I never thought I'd experience it." Ethan blinked, absorbing her words. "Clinical death? Yes," she explained, her voice shaky. "There are some species like mine who have evolved to survive even when their hearts stop. We enter a state of stasis, almost like a coma. It's the only way we can escape death when the damage is too great." She glanced down at her hands, her fingers trembling. "I was abandoned, left to die in the sands." "By who?" Ethan asked, his curiosity piqued despite the intensity of the situation. "By my own people," she whispered, her voice thick with sorrow. "They saw me as a failure, a defect. They never wanted me to be anything more than a weapon. And when I was no longer useful, they cast me aside, left me in the ruins of my people's past." Ethan's heart tightened as he listened to her story. It wasn't just a tale of survival. It was a tale of betrayal, of being abandoned by those who should have cared for her. He could hear the pain in her voice, the weight of her past hanging heavy in the air. "Well," he said softly, "you're not alone now, not while I'm here." Solara gave him a small, faint smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you, Ethan, but you don't know what you're getting yourself into." Ethan straightened, his resolve hardening. "I'm not the type of guy to walk away from someone who needs help, not anymore." He turned his attention back to the diagnostic panel, but his thoughts were racing. Who could have done this to her? Who would want to destroy a species like the Valyrians? And why was she being hunted? Before he could delve deeper into these questions, the ship's radar beeped urgently, pulling him back to reality. Ethan frowned, his eyes scanning the screen. A ship was closing in fast, and it wasn't just any ship. It was the unmistakable signature of a syndicate vessel. "Looks like our friends found us," Ethan muttered under his breath. Solara tensed beside him, her eyes narrowing as she stared at the radar. "They're coming for me," she said, her voice cold and filled with determination. "And this time, they won't stop until they have me." Ethan met her gaze, a fire igniting in his chest. "We'll make sure they don't get the chance." The battle was about to begin, and Ethan had no intention of losing, not when he had something worth fighting for. The hum of the engines on the horizon's edge was steady, but the tension in the ship was palpable. As Ethan gripped the controls, his mind raced. Solara sat beside him, her expression hardened with determination, yet there was something in her eyes that betrayed her uncertainty. The syndicate was coming, and they were relentless. Ethan knew that the moment they spotted them, they would stop at nothing to capture Solara, and from the way she spoke of them, he suspected they wouldn't hesitate to kill anyone who got in their way. "You ready?" Ethan asked, his voice steady despite the rising pressure in his chest. Solara nodded, her violet skin glowing faintly in the dim light of the cockpit. "I'll never be ready for them, but we don't have much of a choice, do we?" "No," Ethan replied, his fingers tightening around the ship's controls. "We don't." The syndicate vessel was closing in rapidly, its sleek silhouette cutting through the distant stars. The radar blinked red, warning Ethan that they were now in the kill zone. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. It wasn't just about escaping anymore. He was determined to protect her, not just because she needed help, but because something had changed in him since their first encounter. Solara was no longer just a stranger he had saved from the sands. She was someone he was willing to fight for. "Hold on," Ethan muttered, pulling the ship into a sharp turn. The syndicate ship followed with ease, its advanced systems clearly outmatching his. He could hear the sounds of the pursuit growing louder. The enemy was gaining on them, and they weren't just aiming to capture. The plasma bolts that began to streak across the sky told Ethan all he needed to know. They were trying to destroy him, and they'd succeed unless he could outmaneuver them. Solara tensed beside him, gripping her seat. She had recovered enough from her earlier weakness to understand the gravity of their situation. She leaned forward, her indigo eyes flashing, with a mixture of fear and defiance. "They're not just going to let us go, are they?" she asked, her voice edged with bitterness. "No," Ethan replied, his voice hard as steel. "But I'll make sure they regret it." With one swift motion, he slammed the ship's engines to full throttle, sending them rocketing through the stars. The horizon's edge lurched forward, accelerating faster than it had ever done before. The syndicate ship followed closely, but Ethan wasn't about to let them get the upper hand. He angled the ship toward a nearby asteroid field, its jagged rocks and scattered debris creating a natural labyrinth that he knew would slow down any pursuing vessel. "We need to lose them in there," Ethan said, his eyes scanning the radar for the best route. "It's the only chance we've got." Solara nodded, her lips pressed into a tight line as she glanced at the approaching asteroid field. "I've never seen a pilot take a ship through an asteroid field like that. Are you sure you can do it?" "I've done worse," Ethan grinned, a confident edge creeping into his voice. "Hang on tight." He veered the ship into the heart of the asteroid field, expertly dodging the massive rocks that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The ship groaned under the stress of the sharp turns and tight maneuvers, but Ethan was a seasoned pilot, and he knew how to push the horizon's edge to its limits. The syndicate vessel, however, was not as agile. The larger, more cumbersome ship struggled to keep up, its energy bolts missing by mere inches as it tried to fire at Ethan's ship. "They're slowing down," Solara observed, her eyes sharp, as she tracked the movements of their pursuer. "But they're still coming. They'll be back on us the moment we break out of here." Ethan replied, his focus unwavering. We need a plan, and fast. He gritted his teeth as another volley of plasma bolts exploded behind them, sending a shockwave that rattled the ship. His shields flickered in warning, but they held, barely. What do you suggest? Solara asked, her voice tight. I've got some tricks up my sleeve, but I need time to access them. Ethan glanced at her, surprised by the urgency in her tone. He wasn't entirely sure what she meant by accessing her tricks, but the way she had spoken earlier about her abilities made him think that whatever she could do, it was going to be more than just useful. Just tell me what you need, Ethan said, his voice steady as he darted between two massive asteroids. We'll figure it out. Solara's fingers flew over the console, her eyes glowing with a faint, otherworldly light. She muttered something in a language Ethan didn't understand, and for a moment he thought she was trying to speak to the ship. But then the lights in the cockpit flickered, and he heard a soft, almost musical hum coming from the ship's systems. What the hell? Ethan muttered, his eyes widening as the ship's console came to life in a way he had never seen before. The radar screen shifted, and suddenly, the horizon's edge seemed to have access to a new set of controls, alien in nature, yet perfectly integrated with the ship's systems. Solara looked at him, her face tense but determined. I've tapped into the ancient tech we found earlier, she explained, her voice now laced with power. It's a part of me. It's been dormant, but now that we're connected, I can draw from it. Wait, you mean this ship? Ethan asked, eyes scanning the new interface. Yes, Solara said, nodding. But not just the ship, it's the tech buried in me too. Together we can access its power, its speed. We can do things that should be impossible. Before Ethan could respond, a loud explosion rattled the ship, followed by another near miss from the Syndicate's weapons. The enemy ship was closing in fast, but Solara's eyes narrowed with resolve. Hold on, she commanded as her fingers danced over the console. Suddenly, the ship surged forward with a force that threw Ethan back in his seat. The asteroid field around them seemed to blur, and the ship began to warp, its engines glowing brighter than ever before. What the hell is happening? Ethan gasped, his hands gripping the console. We've activated a system override, Solara replied, her voice filled with a mix of awe and focus. We're using the Valyrian energy to boost the ship's capabilities. It's not permanent, but it'll buy us some time. The horizon's edge zipped through the asteroid field at impossible speeds, dodging debris and weaving through narrow gaps. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, both from the thrill of the chase and the overwhelming rush of adrenaline. The Syndicate ship tried to follow, but the gap between them grew larger with every passing second. Ethan pushed the ship harder, using every trick he knew to outmaneuver their pursuer. Solara's energy pulsed through the systems, guiding the ship through the chaos like a living entity. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ethan pulled the ship out of the asteroid field, breaking free into open space. The Syndicate vessel was nowhere in sight. We lost them, Ethan said, a mix of relief and disbelief in his voice. He could hardly believe they had made it through. For now, Solara said, her voice calm, but there was something in her eyes that told Ethan their troubles were far from over. As the two ships drifted apart, the vast expanse of space stretched out before them, filled with uncertainty. Ethan knew they had just won a battle, but the war was far from over, and the truth of who was chasing them and why was still out there waiting to be uncovered. We need to figure out what comes next, Ethan said, his voice steady as he looked at Solara. And we need to be ready for whatever the Syndicate throws at us. Solara met his gaze, her face filled with determination. We'll be ready, she said, her voice firm. The struggle for survival had only just begun. The vast, black emptiness of space stretched out before them like an endless canvas, with only the occasional glint of distant stars dotting the horizon. The horizon's edge floated silently, its damaged hull creaking slightly from the stress of their daring escape. Ethan Barron sat in the cockpit, his fingers lightly grazing the controls. Despite the temporary calm, his mind raced. The Syndicate wasn't going to stop, not after what had just happened, and now, With Solara by his side, things were about to get much more complicated. Solara sat beside him, her violet skin still glowing faintly from the energy she had used to save them in the asteroid field. The bond between them was growing stronger, and Ethan could feel her presence beside him like a whisper in the back of his mind. It was as if they were becoming one, connected in ways that went beyond the physical. Whatever had happened during that brief moment of heightened connection, it had changed both of them. And now he couldn't help but feel as though they were heading toward something far bigger than either of them had anticipated. "We're not out of the woods yet," Ethan said, his voice low, as he glanced over at Solara. "I know," she replied, her tone steady but filled with an unspoken tension. "The syndicate is just getting started. If they found us once, they'll find us again." Ethan exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the distant stars. They would find them again, but he wouldn't let them take Solara, no matter what. The silence between them was thick with uncertainty, and even though they had escaped the syndicate's immediate pursuit, they both knew it was only a matter of time before they would strike again. He thought about the data they had taken from the syndicate's flagship, the encrypted files that were now securely stored in the ship's mainframe. It contained information that could bring down the entire syndicate, if they could get it, to the right people. But the question was, who could they trust? And how long would it be before the syndicate found them again? "What do you think the syndicate wants with you?" Ethan asked, breaking the silence. Solara looked away, her expression hardening as memories she had tried to bury resurfaced. "They want the knowledge buried within my blood. My people were once the architects of life, bioengineering, creating weapons and warriors. They believe that by experimenting on me, they can unlock that power for themselves." "And what do they want to do with it?" Ethan pressed, his voice serious. "Use it," Solara said softly, her eyes filled with sorrow. "To create armies, to control entire worlds. They're already testing biological weapons. They've been trying to perfect a formula for years, one that selectively destroys races, wiping them out completely while leaving others untouched. They think they can control life and death with it." "That's insane," Ethan muttered, a chill running down his spine. "And you're the key to stopping it?" "I'm the key to their success," Solara replied, her voice tinged with bitterness. "But I'm also the key to their destruction. I've been running for so long trying to outrun them, but they always find a way." "Not this time," Ethan said firmly, gripping the controls with renewed determination. "This time we fight back." They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of their situation settling in. The vast emptiness of space was no longer comforting. It was oppressive. But there was something else too. Something in Ethan's chest, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. He was no longer just an explorer. He was a protector, and Solara wasn't just some stranger. She was someone who had survived against all odds and someone who could change the future of the galaxy. The sudden beep of the ship's radar snapped Ethan out of his thoughts. He glanced at the console, his eyes narrowing. A faint signal was coming through, an encrypted transmission. "What now?" Solara asked, her voice cautious. "It's a message," Ethan said, leaning forward and activating the communication system. "It's coming from Europa." The screen flickered to life, revealing the familiar face of Admiral Parker, an old contact of Ethan's from his time in Special Forces. Parker was grizzled, battle-worn, and one of the few people Ethan trusted, but there was something different in his expression today. "Ethan, you there?" Parker's voice crackled through the static. "Yeah, I'm here," Ethan replied. "What's going on?" "I've got bad news," Parker said, his voice grim. "The syndicate is escalating. We've intercepted their movements, and they're already assembling a fleet. They're not just going after you, they're going after the data you have. And worse, they've got help from the Galactic Council. Corrupt officials are working with them." "Damn it," Ethan muttered, slamming his fist against the console. "We can't run forever, we need a plan." "That's why I'm calling," Parker said. "We've got a hidden base on Europa. It's not much, but it's safe for now. If you bring the data here, we can help you make a move. But it won't be easy. The syndicate will be watching you, and they won't stop until they have everything. Solara glanced at Ethan, her eyes filled with both relief and hesitation. Europa, that's where my people hid the last of the technology, she said, her voice trembling slightly. The syndicate won't stop until they have it all. Then we won't give it to them, Ethan said, his voice firm. We'll go to Europa and fight back. It's time to end this. The journey to Europa was long, but time seemed to stretch and warp as they drew closer to the icy world. The tension between Ethan and Solara had changed. It was no longer just about survival. It was about something deeper, something that transcended the chaos of the galaxy. Their bond had grown stronger, and with it, the stakes had been raised. As they entered Europa's orbit, the vast icy surface of the planet shimmered beneath them, its frozen landscape offering no comfort. But Ethan had a plan. He wasn't just going to hand over the data to Europa's resistance. No, he was going to use it to expose the syndicate for what they were and wipe out their stranglehold on the galaxy once and for all. We're here, Ethan said, his voice steady. Let's finish this. They touched down on the surface of Europa, but before they could even prepare to move, the warning alarms blared. A massive fleet of syndicate warships had arrived, blocking their escape route. They had been followed, and now the final battle was about to begin. This is it, Solara said, her voice calm but laced with determination. No more running. Ethan smiled, a fierce, protective grin that made his heart race. No more running. As the syndicate's forces closed in, Ethan and Solara stepped out of the ship, ready to face whatever came next. Together they would change the fate of the galaxy. No more hiding. No more fear. The final stand had begun.